What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over changing our character's skin depending on what we choose at the character select screen. So we actually already have this functionality in to change the colors on the character select screen. However, we're going to be implementing actually making the character change their materials or their mesh in the game, depending on what choice we choose in here. Now specifically this will be for player 1. When we do gamepad support, which will be the next episode we do for menus on the Super Smash Brothers tutorial series, we'll be going over how to change it for all characters, but since we're only using our mouse and changing one character at the time, then it's not really relevant. However, you'll be able to use this method for all 4 characters. We'll just have to change the character that it is actually being applied to. So anyway, to get started, we're going to go in, we're going to select our character, we're going to change his color, and we're going to load the game. So in this case, you can see I've now made the default for my characters gold, and I believe the second character I've made silver, like a chrome color. But my second outfit for my first character is like a rust, I believe it's called, or something along those lines. So how I did that, and this is still up, this will be fixed when we do our gamepad menu, which I promise I am getting to. How I did that is I just went to my character mesh, which I have second character mesh and default character mesh. Now you guys have seen this before, but I'm just showing you. Before this was like a tan color. I've switched it to be this M metal gold. If you want to use it, it's just in starter content. I just thought it looked a little bit nicer because I could differentiate the characters a little bit more, since they were kind of random character materials before. And then second character mesh went from the clown color that he was, whatever, the mix of colors that he was, and went to metal chrome. So this is what they'll look like now. But I've made other color options for each of the 2 characters on here. So you see this guy was gold. If I select this guy and change his color, you'll see that they're all chrome, but he's like this rock color instead. So if I go stand next to this guy, there you go. So the characters have different default colors now, and we can actually change the colors that are relevant to that specific character. So let's get started. All we're going to need to do is kind of reference some of the stuff we've done in our character select screen to be able to perform this functionality. So if you have not watched my episodes on the character select screen, it's okay. You don't necessarily have to, but it'll be very helpful to know where we're actually setting the character skin index. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the icon in the top right corner to the first episode of the character select screen. It is 3 episodes, but you can get the entire Super Smash Brothers functionality done in that time. Otherwise, the short version of this is I have a structure called player details that I set up in code. It has 3 things: the class, which is the character, the player name, which is the actual name of, like, if I was going to put Sean over my character's head, and character skin, which is the outfit they're wearing. Character skin is actually just an integer that stores the index, and when we access this index, we're going to determine what skin we want to put on our character, or what costume we want to put on our character. Okay, so this was already done in a previous episode, so you don't have to change anything with this. I'm just showing you. We were setting it when we called the change character skin function, which comes from the determine character skin function, which comes from when we click on or press, so it doesn't be a click. If we hit enter, any sort of confirm button, when we press on the button right here. So this is actually a button. You can see when I hover over it, it does the default button functionality to highlight. See, it kind of changed colors in the background there. So on press, we determine the character skin. So we change the icon, but you can actually see that not only do we change the icon, but like I said, we go in here and we actually set members of the player detail structure for that player, and we go ahead and set their character skin. So that's what we're referencing today. We already set our character skin index in this video, in that last video on character selection. I believe this was specifically done in part 3. So you can see that's how we've done it, and then we use the value to set the brush. Great. Now what we're going to do with that information is we're going to go to our game mode BP, call some functions, and then in our character BPs, we're going to set the value we want. The first thing we need to do is set up something in our base character interface. Now, if you're not familiar with this, and again, if you haven't been watching the series, that's fine. Let me go ahead and explain to you what this is. If you go to Add New, Blueprints, Blueprint Interface right here. If you select this, it'll make a new little actor here, a little object here. You can just type in whatever you want, EP interface if you want. And when you click into this, you have these functions that you can make, and you can't define any functionality in the graph. The whole point of these are you make functions that then can be included by any number of classes that you want, and so you can go ahead and call them in something like your game mode, and all your characters will have access to this class, even if they're not in a parent-child relationship. So I'm going to delete this because we already have one. I just kind of want to show you what it's going to look like when you first make it. When we go into Hours, I already had a function called set character references, which we made in another episode. This is how we were determining who was player 1, 2, 3, 4, or however many you have. That way they don't all get mixed information, and the player 1 is actually player 1 for everybody in the game. So there you go. If you remember this function that we made and are using, we're doing the same thing here, except this is going to be our change character costume. So I went ahead and just added a new function, called it change character costume. You may need to compile and save before you can add inputs. Sometimes you need to do that, but do that, and then you can hit the little plus here next to inputs to add a parameter. We're going to add a costume index, or skin index, or whatever you want to call it. This is literally, it's just going to be taking in our character skin integer that we had in our character select screen that I was referencing. This value right here, this value right there is going to be used to go into this costume index, so we know what value to change to when this function gets called. Now the thing is, since we're in a specific level right now, we're in the main menu, and we're not currently level streaming, so we're actually switching levels to go to the level we want to open for our characters to start playing on. Because of that, we can't go ahead and access our character and change his skin right then. So what instead we're going to do is wait until the characters spawn in the game mode. We set their character references so we know they're valid. Again, this was done in a previous episode. But right after, at the very end of our game mode, what we do is we go through our characters and we change character costume, which is the function that I made right here. And we call that for every character. So every character takes their character skin value that they have in the player details structure that we made, and we grab their character skin, and then we pass that into the change character costume function. Then in each of our characters, we handle it to set the proper materials. So that's the large overview. Now let's get into a little bit more depth. So we have this is good. You just need this integer. If you want to call it anywhere, like for example, let's go to our base game mode BP first. You're going to need to be able to call this function. So to be able to call the function, you don't have to include it in your settings or anything. Only when you're handling it will you need to include your interface. So in your base game mode BP, don't worry about including anything. Don't worry about including your base character interface. We're just going to go ahead and send it as a message is what it's called. So first of all, we're grabbing our game instance reference. If you haven't been following the series, that's fine, but the game instance reference is something I have set up to get all the data. You can see I have my players array in it, so I can get the length. I can see how many people are currently playing, how many characters have spawned, what character class everyone is. This holds my player array, so I can get all the information out of my base game instance. We're going to grab the base game instance, we're going to grab our player array, and then we're going to get the index from our for loop here. You can see we're looping through players. Basically, this players array is just a players array that gets made in the game mode to handle stuff that the game instance does not need to know about. Difference-wise, the game instance carries information throughout levels and the entire length of the game. So if you're switching levels, switching characters, all that can stay. This just cares about the game mode, so like if we quit back to the main menu, this will become empty again. So I make this for various reasons, and then we loop through all the players that are in this current game mode. Once we do that, we grab our players array, make sure we get the same index that we're using on our game mode, and then we break and get player details. So the way this looks is, if you have your players array, you can type get and get a reference. reference just a little bit faster, and we can change the reference. We don't need to get a copy for any reason. We're not doing a check or anything. We're just going to change the character costume. And then drag out of the for loops array index and hit get. And then drag off of this and type break. And it should come up, but just find your structure and say break player details or whatever your structure name is. Then you can just go ahead and call change character costume. Since we haven't included it in our base game mode BP, you should only have one option. It'll be your message. Click that. And then drag in your character skin. And then, of course, drag the code flow through it. I'm going to delete this because we have it right up above, but that's how you can actually put that into place. Now, the change character costume or any interface function that you're using when you're sending it as a message, if they're not directly related, like if this isn't part of the class that it's being implemented in, then you need to make sure you have a target. Well, the target is the current player that we're on in our players array, which means this is our specific character, right? You can see it's an SSB template character object reference, which is our base character. So we use that as the target, use the character skin as the costume index. Okay? Then we can go into our individual characters and set up some stuff. It's the same function for each, and the function is really just an event handling of the function that we made in the base character interface. So the way you find this one is if you if you go into class settings on each of your classes, your SSB template character, and I have SSB template character 2, however many characters you have that you want to perform this functionality on, if you go into each of them, go to class settings, and look at implemented interfaces. You may already have done this if you had the set character references function that we have here, but if you haven't done that, that's fine. Just go ahead and go to interfaces, hit add, and then find the one you want. When you add one, you won't be able to see it in this list anymore, so you can see mine isn't here. But if I didn't have base character interface in here, you'd find it in the list. Just select it, and you'll be good to go. Just to show you, you do need to do it for both players as well, so I've done it here. Then when you want to actually handle it, like we're doing here, what this is doing is when this message gets called in the game mode, then this functionality occurs. So we go ahead and call event change, whoops, if I could spell it right, change character costume. If you type event, that's how you know it'll be a handle. You can take out event and just find it, but you'll have a few different options. You don't want to call the function in this case, and you don't want the interface call. You just want the event because this is the handle for it. Okay, and then you have your costume index parameter. So what we're going to do is make something called a skin array, outfit array, costume array, whatever you want to call it. This is what's going to hold your different materials. Now, in this case, we're just changing materials. If you want to change your actual outfit, like in Super Smash Brothers, a lot of times the characters have a skin that actually changes and like they'll now have a top hat on, or specifically in the case of like Bowser Jr., then you might want to go ahead and change their actual mesh as opposed to just their skin. If that's the case, you can actually do the exact same thing. And what you can do is instead of using a skin array, you can have a mesh array or something like that. And instead of making it materials, which I'll show you how to make this in a second, you can make it static meshes or skeletal meshes. And then lastly, instead of just calling set material, you can just call set mesh. And set skeletal mesh right here. And then choose your mesh from the array. Now, we'll get into that more because we're actually going to do some character creation down the line, kind of like how Mii's work. So don't worry about that too much. If you want that for your game, but you don't need it right now, then we'll get to it. But if you want to get ahead of it, that's how you do it. You can use this exact same method, but instead of using materials and materials, you use mesh and mesh. But anyway, back to this. So the skin array is an array I've made of different materials that I want to use on my character. Now, I've made this specific to each character because I want each character to have a different set of materials they can use, different set of costumes they can use. So all you got to do is make a new variable, call it whatever you want. I called mine skin array, it can be costume array, outfit array, and then look for material. And it's literally just material and hit object reference. Then once you have this, click on the actual variable type here on the side, and then make it an array. Once you do that, you'll have your material array. So I'm going to delete this because I've already got mine. And then you can drag it on the screen and pull out and type get. You'll have to get a copy. Then you use your costume index as the integer to reference. Remember, this is our character skin integer that we have in the player details. So this will be updated with our character select screen as we change the value. And as we change the value, we'll grab a new value from the skin array. Then we drag off of this and hit set material. It'll be of the mesh. There are a few different things you can do depending on what kind of object you're pulling from here. Like this is material object reference, and we're just calling set material on it, so it automatically puts the mesh in. You could actually put a few different things in because the target is just a primitive component, but for right now it's not really important. Just grab the one that says mesh in parentheses. I think it says static. No, it says skeletal mesh, excuse me. So the one that says skeletal mesh in parentheses. And then the element index will depend on what your character looks like. So for me, like if I click on the character and I go to his mesh, you see his element 0 is this copper material. So if you have multiple materials that you need to change, then you may need to adjust for multiple indices, multiple material indices. For now, I just have one. It's just a color swap. So I want M metal copper. If you have more than one, I have a fighting game episode that covers that, but we'll probably cover it later in this series, so it's not a huge deal. Basically, you can just make an array, like duplicate this array, but change the values for the other parts, the other elements, and it'll be different for characters. So say he had 3 element indices, then you want to make 3 arrays. But anyway, say we just had 1 in this case, element 0, then just leave this at element 0. And then drag your line through and you're good. That's what it should look like. In your skin array, you may need to compile before you can change your values here, but you can just go ahead and hit this little plus to add elements. I just added 2. I can add as many as I want and just change a color like body, and you'll be good to go. If you want to test it first, like I'm gonna remove this one. If you want to test it first, just go into your viewport, go into your mesh, and change the default. You can see it changes in real time. As long as it's been loaded before, it might take a second. Like if I put steel on, you can see it's got to compile shaders. But it gets there eventually. I forget which one he was even on. I think he was on... No, he wasn't on this. He was on copper? I think he was on copper. But there you go. Cool. Then do that for all characters that you have, except in this case you can see my skin array has different values. I've got chrome and rock. So I'll show you going through all of them. So if I select my character and don't change, they're gold. If I go ahead and select my character and change once, he's copper. And then if I were to add another index, he would be a 3rd color. However, since there is no index that relates to that skin array, then the 3rd index literally just puts me back as gold. Makes sense? So make sure your character select screen has as many options available as your characters have outfits. And then same with this guy. If I don't pick anything, then we're chrome. If I pick the 2nd color, then I'm this rock guy. And lastly, if I pick the 3rd color, then I'm back to chrome because he only has 2 options, not 3. So there you go, guys. That's how you can determine what character should have what outfit and how to change their materials at runtime and things like that. Hope you enjoyed this video. If it helped you, please subscribe. It does more for the channel than anything else you can do. And quite frankly, it just lets me know I'm doing a good job teaching you guys what you want to learn. In the next episode, we'll probably bite the bullet and just go for gamepad support. It's about time we allow for multiplayer menus, and we'll need to do that with both keyboard and gamepad depending on what kind of game you're making. So I think that's a good next step. If you guys had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to reach out to me on Discord. There's a link in the description, and you can join the community and get some help. We recently got the option to join memberships for this channel. So I've added some perks to the memberships if you want to come support the channel. If you're not familiar, it's like Patreon, but directly on YouTube. You can get rewards and badges and things like that just by supporting the channel each month. I've locked nothing that you guys have already had behind doors of the memberships or Patreon, so feel free to support them at your own leisure. No obligations, and you won't be missing anything if you don't support the channel through memberships. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27. We've been playing Demon's Souls lately, which has been a lot of fun. Very, very tiring, but a lot of fun. And when we're not doing that, we're finishing up the Resident Evil 7 DLC. So feel free to come check us out and have a good time. But most importantly of all, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.